mic's on.
Yes, it is.
Okay. We gotta turn my on so we can get everything.
If you guys push the button on your microphones, is it red right now?
Okay, right now, let's make sure we can get all this.
Y'all are good. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So that, I'll introduce Keith Walnut, he's our project manager for DTJ, and I'll let him introduce his colleague, and then we're gonna jump into y'all's feedback and comments on the proposed goals, and have a dialogue, and then, we're gonna talk about next steps and what you guys can expect in the next couple weeks. So, here.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks. Hi, again, Keith Walzak with DTJ, and with me is Chad Gerard, also with the DTJ out of our Austin office. Chad's going to be helping out as a fully and tracking the plan for you all over the next couple of months. So here again this afternoon, we had a really fun last night. We got a chance to try to get, I think it's recorded or it was live streamed and it's recorded. So we got a chance to take a look at that. It was a really big dialogue and it was really helpful for us as well. So we appreciate that input. What we'd like to do, I'd like to just try to make sure here is not just be talking, because we really can't talk. So if we can just have a good dialogue about what you've been kind of learning about the plan, the draft policy so far, and then we'll just take that input and then we'll process that input and bring that back to you next month or the next division. So I want to just get out what the purpose of tonight's meeting is. Again, focus on the feedback loop that we had over the last, specifically focusing on policies. We will get into more strategies in the next few weeks. So we want to really focus on the policy at that point in time, and then I'll wrap up and talk about the next critical steps going forward. Again, sorry, this is a repetition of what I just said. So, project timeline, policy is our focus for today. And by the way, you have the entire presentation that you can't see it's there. Feel free to ask any questions along the way. I encourage you to do that. Some things I'd like to point out about project timeline. For our contract, committed to providing a draft plan by the end of March. And I've been talking to Elena and other staff members that it's possible that we might push that out. We really want to get that feedback from you all. If you're comfortable with the process and the flow, or if we need to push it out, we're very, very flexible with that, with respect to that. But our commitment was to provide a draft plan by the end of March, and then you all as a community would go into the process, the plan review process. The plan would then be released to the broader. We could do that in a number of different ways. It would be a project website. We could even do copies and make print copies of the draft plans available here at the library, the rec center. So there's different ways of getting the plan out to the community. But we want to talk about that in the next few weeks. But the other thing I'm going to point out is in the last weeks. I came on board about October. You all had been doing a lot of work before I showed up. But there's a number of tasks that we've been advancing concurrently. So right there in the middle, in the green, is the draft policies. Right behind the policy development are strategies. And I'll talk about the differences between what a vision statement is, what a goal statement, what a policy is, and what strategies is here in the next few minutes. But none of those are a firm start date. It's a continuous, iterative process. We never stop talking about these things until you actually adopt your plan. So don't feel that just because that bar has a line to it, all of a sudden that task is over. It's not the case. We're constantly reviewing these policies, refining the policies, and there's lots of opportunities along the way to make sure we get better path. So let me just remind ourselves that we're focusing on the comprehensive plan, but part of the comprehensive plan is the I-69 corridor study and the downtown plan. These things all work together. And so we have been starting to craft these documents with our sub-consultant team. We've not given our content yet to Elaine and staff. We're going to be doing that in the next few weeks. But we've been working on all three of these pieces concurrently. And they all work together. So when you plan, and you want the last couple, 3 weeks, you've seen plan elements, policies. Some of the policies or plan elements are specific to the downtown plan. We want to make sure that the comprehensive plan is addressing all this, but we're going to drill into more detail when it comes to these other components, the downtown plan. So these three documents will work together, but they'll look different. Brought all last month, and I kind of wanted to focus on a couple of things here. the continuum of what we've been doing and what we are doing. So we are, again, in the policy development phase. We're going to be going into the strategies. But the previous steps that I talked about earlier, the vision statement, the guiding principles, the goals, it's a constant refinement. We're not done with those pieces. We're still working with you to refine those pieces. So we're going to compile all these pieces together, and that's what we'll be providing to you at the end of March for our contract schedule. I wanted to back up real quick and outline the chapters or document, how it might lay out. So what you see in blue are potential chapters. Again, all up for discussion. But what I want to point out here is that chapter is really about the context of your community. Where does the city of Nacogdoches fit within the region, within the eastern part of Texas, from an economic standpoint, from a demographic standpoint? What is the infrastructure in your community looking like? What is the mobility systems looking like? All of that conversation will happen in the first chapter under community context. We'll talk about history, we'll talk about culture, we'll hit on those things at a very, very high level. The information that we're gleaning from to create that first chapter is the existing conditions report that months ago that you all have seen. Also that we've been developing along the way. So what we're doing is we're taking information from those pieces and creating that contextual first chapter. The next chapter is to talk about your community that we've interpreted from you. So we're again not writing your vision or your goals, and we're expressing it into chapter 2. So this is a really important component of the plan. There's been some questions, some great feedback from you all when you were looking at the policies in the framework plan that we gave you, that there was noticeably policies about land use. We have an entire chapter on land use, the focus on what the city's land uses are today, what the sphere of influence beyond the city limits in the county. We'll have that discussion. We'll have a future land use map presented. We'll have a series of map graphics that talks about the land use component of your community. So it is a really important piece. We haven't omitted it. We have an entire chapter dedicated to that discussion. And by the way, your 2003 plan does do the same thing. So we will have an entire chapter on land use policies and mapping out future land uses. In that same chapter, there'll be a land use map on the downtown and on the I-69 border. Chapter 4 is what you all have started to look at already. I'm going to remind you all the colorful wheel that we presented. That's the framework, and it identifies. That's chapter in great detail on each principle. So A, B, C are your guiding principles at this moment in time. It's all draft.
Keith,
Each
can I ask
one
a
of those
question?
elements then has a series of all draft.
So the land use, is that going to be the I-69 corridor study that you have right here that's underneath it? Is that
The land
chapter?
use.
Yeah, is that what you're referring to in chapter 3?
Yes, but so what we'll have is a overall land use plan of the entire city.
Okay.
Uses, future uses. Within that same land use diagram map, we're going to go into more detail into your downtown, isolating, focusing on the downtown, and then more detail into the corridor. So it's the same basic future land use map uses that encompasses all three pieces, but when we get into these other components, we're going to drill down into more detail.
Okay.
So it's repeating the future land uses as we go. It won't be like all of a sudden we're land uses from the comp plan on the border. It's going to be very consistent in that. Is that help?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, we have very specific, chapter 5 will be specific to implementation strategies. What you don't see on this slide is the number 6, which is appendix items. Appendix items are really important. That existing conditions report that we worked on, the housing study that we've been talking about the last couple of days, are examples of the appendix items. They are everything else in this plan document. Okay, so there will be appendix items that be part of the document as well. We're envisioning that this is a PDF digital document that can be on the website, so that if you wanted to look at a plan, you could go right. But if you wanted to go to an appendix item to look at the existing conditions data or the survey data through the engagement program, you can click onto that PDF item as well. So you can quickly navigate the website to get from one document to the next. It'll also be in print form for obvious reasons. We want all people to be able to have access to this document. But envisioning that there'll be digital PDF documents, and they'll be broken out into the corridor study and downtown plan, for instance, will be their own PDF documents as well. So this is not complete, but we're feeling pretty comfortable about this, and obviously we want your feedback on it as well when you see the draft plan. So I wanted to just talk the difference between what is a vision statement, what is a goal statement, what's a policy, which is oftentimes thought of as objective statements, and what a strategy is. So the vision is, if you read this, it conveys your view of your community, what you're going to be looking like 20 years from now. So it's not the vision, it's not what you are today, it's what you're going to be in the future. That is the idea of it. So we crack in and you all start to look at that and start to comment on it. It tends to be very high level, 30,000 foot sort of view of what your community is all about. So if somebody picks up this document, they understand pretty quickly where you're trying to go over the next 10, 15, 20 years. As opposed to a goal statement is still fairly general. It's specific to a plan element. So let me give you an example. I'll show you the wheel here. I should have had this slide on the first one. Each one of the outer rings is your guiding principle. Under a guiding principle on community identity, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plan elements. Each one of those plan elements has a goal statement, as you all saw, right? So goal statement, take your vision statement, and is very specific to that particular plan element. It's still high level. It's still aspirational. Oops, sorry. It's still very much aspirational. It's generally thought of as being very succinct. It's not drawn out, paragraph. It's a very succinct statement, a goal statement. Sometimes it's not even measurable. By the time you get to policies, once you've read that goal and you start to understand, from a tourism standpoint, for instance, our goal is to our community. That's a goal statement. Policies are, how do you do that? How do we start thinking about attracting people to our community? And there might be multiple policies. So now it's starting to become measurable statements. It's very clear, kind of move toward more detail. And then finally, by the time you get to the actions, these are actionable items. You can specifically read what the specific action item is, who is responsible, agency, what department is responsible for it, what priority that item is. So you're going from very, very high level to very much specific, drilling down into actionable items. So each one of these things are quite different from each other, but they work together. So I want to make sure that it's about that because, in our world time, and this is not familiar with you all, but that's the intent of the framework we developed as we start to dive in. So it makes sense to us, but if it doesn't make sense to you all, we'll work through this. That must mean it's really good. All right. So again, we presented this draft statement last month. You all looked at it, gave us some good feedback with the land's help and staff's help. We haven't modified it yet, so just to remind you that the summary email on your input, we just got it Friday or maybe Monday.
Yeah, we sent like some of it before because we didn't get everything. The rest of it we sent you for the rest of it.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is we haven't modified anything because we haven't had time to talk to you about it. So early draft vision statement here. And back to this, the wheel. So again, guiding principles. Items on the left side.
Can you go back a minute? I have to say what I have to say. When you say emotional and historic roots in this community, I don't believe that's a true statement. That's my personal.
Yeah, I read your comments.
Yeah.
I don't say that. This has to say what you believe. It's not me. It has nothing to do with me. We started with putting something on paper.
Okay.
You're reacting to something, which is great. This statement has nothing to do with us. This is all. And that's why that you make sure that says what you needed to say. All we're doing is helping you write the words. So that's why I was really impressed with your nowadays. You're talking about a word that made a difference with you, and maybe other people value that and share that. Maybe other people don't. It's really up to you all.
I remember when we carved that out, and it was a collaboration in the room, and it was tended to be aspirational, and so the body, the members actually, you recall, we went to the board, and that was what we ended up with. That would
very
be
much
better.
still a draft. And I took to heart the comments that you made, and that was great. I was appreciative of reading that. You have to work through that and find out what resonates and what reflects the values of your type. And also, another important body of folks that represents the community. That's key. You're representing other people in the community.
And I think Keith, there was discussion about, are we doing that day? Are we embracing, those cultures today? And maybe we're not as much as we want to be, but if this is what we want our future, outcome to be, then yeah, that's a good statement. And we do want to be a community that embraces, our cultural and historic roots. And so I think a lot of the discussion was, do we do this today versus, desired future? And
trying to make sure we go back and understand what is it. It's the future. Looking to the future. If we have an opportunity to embrace multiculturalism, and we haven't in the past, it's okay. Nobody's judging, but we have to think about that's what we want in the future. That's not decided. So this is interesting. I want to point this out. With the Downtown Advisory Committee group, we talked about these guiding principles: economic vitality, environmental sustainability, community identity, and connectivity. And there's discussions amongst that group that maybe there's another guiding principle that's missing. And it's around the topic of inclusivity, diversity, equity, really important topic in many, many, many communities. I'm sure it is here as well. If that is truly a guiding principle, this is the opportunity for us to talk about it and decide, maybe we are missing a very important guiding principle. And so we take this out of the ring and we might be adding another guiding principle. It's entirely up to you all.
Do you
You
say
have any
that
thoughts on
now?
that?
Do you say that now or later?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think it would be a bad thing to add. I wouldn't per se, you already know that we're diverse, we have to make sure that we're in our diversity and equitable in our diversity, because they all fit together. If we already identifying who are, like this is a diverse community, then we need to work on diversity.
Yeah, and I think that needs to be a theme that runs through everything that we do.
Absolutely.
Just
Overarching.
part of it.
Yeah, over. I thought about it was just that, like Paul, what you said, 'cause I think we were pretty careful to make sure we were going through each of the goals. There was a piece of that in, like, if we separate it out, I would just want to make sure that those pieces that we included of inclusivity in each of the individual goals also sort of stay there. So then I wonder what we would say, like what would it even say? Does that make sense?
It does, and we've been doing this with other communities and where I've been working. And the hardest thing is it to rise to the level that it is a guiding principle. And we all say that. Now you explore what is that at your point. So from a healthy living standpoint, inclusivity, equity, you can interpret that. From a tourism standpoint, from a housing, from a mobility standpoint, is our system of transit, bicycle, pedestrian, streets, is it inclusive? Is it equitable? Can sorts move throughout the community? You can start to see that the patterns surface pretty quickly. But the hard part is, do we want to see an additional new guiding principle? Some folks say yes. So I wonder how everybody else feels about that.
I don't think it's not only that it's not going to be like that every time. Because I can look at, which I can't see on the trails of parks and recreation, are our parks and recreation accessible?
Great example.
Is it, so we're not inclusive with that. The same, are we inclusive with something like that? Equitable. So I think it needs to be pointed out in form or fashion, whether that's a guiding principle or not. Because it can't be assumed. It has to be out there.
An inner ring.
Right.
Like it goes around everything.
Yeah.
That, like we're not, like it doesn't be highlighted, but then make sure it's touching everything.
However, yeah.
An inner ring or an outer
Or an outer
ring?
ring,
yeah, outer ring.
The outer ring would tell me it's part of everything.
That makes
It's
outer ring.
right, and literally, I'm glad to hear you say that. We've literally done that to this graphic where, inclusivity is driving everything. Everything we think about. Housing, telecommunications, regional systems. So that's an interesting thing to think about. We're happy to take a shot at modifying this and bringing it back to you.
Keith,
That'd be good.
could I reiterate a point I made and when you were here last time about the my observation of these four components is that, and if you recall, you may not remember, but I'll refresh. I had suggested that maybe there was a fifth component that was missing that encompassed the basic and fundamental components the city provides. Clean water, sewer, infrastructure. And just as I agree with everything that's been said so far, so I'm not trying to counter that, don't get me wrong. But, for example, I just want to, that in public for community identity, that's addressed, but it's almost like it's hidden. And you have, yeah, right there, yeah, the good information that's suggested under that category. But my point is that it just kind of sits off over there to the side, and I'm just curious if anybody else sees it. You know, am I just an oddball here? But in other words, those functions seem to be on the same level in this wheel as bicycle and pedestrian networks. So bicycle networks get a section at the front of this presentation equal to clean water, sewer, electricity, police, fire, all of those things. And to me, there seems to be an imbalance there.
Yeah, I recall the conversation, you're bringing up quick. I recall you were focusing on infrastructure.
Exactly. That was actually where I made the point, and then I found it again displayed in the public facilities, and at our last meeting that you weren't here, I made the point again. So I guess maybe you could say in that regard that what I'm talking about is actually being displayed in two separate places. But
are you suggesting another piece, a strong and sustainable infrastructure, is another piece?
Possibly a fifth component of that basically.
So I would ask, is it a fifth component of the wheel? Because even if you squeeze another one, you're still going to only have little pies that relate to that item.
Right.
Or is it a ring around the entire thing that's saying infrastructure, resiliency, inclusivity, diversity drives everything? And I've heard a lot over the last couple of months that your infrastructure system is really inhibiting your ability to do a lot of things.
Exactly. That's a hot topic right now in our community.
Exactly.
And you want to be aware of
the
it.
driver that you need to, for next, it tells me it's on the periphery. So the graphic might, because it's trying to emphasize that thing.
So my question is, if it is not like a fifth part of the pie, if any of these are measurable objectives that are very specific to, ultimately, to that particular thing. So for example, infrastructure, resilient, that's good, I like it. Strong and resilient infrastructure, you could have, 5 little or something pieces under there. And then if those objectives, then we know we've got those and address them. Whereas if they're all around the circle, but you're still only got those little 2 in there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. This idea of resiliency and infrastructure makes sense when you think about physical infrastructure in the ground, sidewalks, water, sewer. If you start to think and see from an economic development standpoint, small businesses that survive through a pandemic, right? Wow, that doesn't necessarily fall here. It might be interesting, but it certainly wants to be talked about in economic development. So if we introduce a new concept, we need to start rethinking the relationship of these little pieces in between. And it's not hard for us to do with a broader conversation, and it's an important conversation. Boils down to what are the most important guiding principles that you all need to focus on in your plan going forward. Let's figure out what those are, and we'll reorient this graphic accordingly.
So I know we've got to discuss today, but after hearing some of the comments, particularly about inclusivity and there we go. I have some concerns. I'm going to use myself as an example. as the person that's been to exactly one comprehensive planning meeting. If we're talking about being inclusive, this is an aspirational conceptual model, right? This is where we want to be. These are our guiding principles. This group, who can meet at 3:30 in the afternoon every time we have a meeting? I mean, are we really, it is incredibly tough, one in a different community but lives here and this is where they make their home, for even participation in a group to make a plan. So I think being intentional, not just about including people, but reaching out to those communities that are not represented in this group and using public engagement as a really important piece to how we operate as a city moving forward.
Do you feel that to date, with the community engagement effort, surveys, focus groups, community meetings, threats, do you feel it has not touched specific groups that we need to reach out to? And if so, who are they and how can we do that?
I don't know through that. I just want to make sure that we are doing that and less focused on a group that can meet at a certain time. That we are reaching.
I can tell you that we're not only focusing on you.
Certainly, no, I completely.
We have a lot of that. You know, each of us in the different communities that we're a part of have been bringing people together, discussing these things, having large meetings, having small meetings, and we've been doing that for a year. You know, so it's not just the people who are in this room. We're all working with the communities that we represent or the organizations that we represent. Maybe we haven't done the best job and could do more, but we certainly have done lots and lots and lots of these kinds of meetings, both in churches and in civic groups. And, you know, so sorry you haven't been able to see that, but most of us have been doing that.
Chad, what you said, if I'm correct, that needs to be an intentional thing that might be added as well.
Right, is that we make sure, not just as part of planning, but as we operate as a city, that we're including people that in my ward that say, what is this whole comprehensive planning thing? The only thing they've heard is what I'm telling them from the meetings that we've had as a council and meetings that I'm from this group. They don't have a clue. And so I want to make sure that we're communicating our messaging to make sure that many people are as involved as possible. And so I'm not saying that we're not doing a good job. I'm saying that as this outer wheel, making sure that we engage our public is important also.
And I do want to add one thing, and I do have another conflict. So, and that's if I realized last night have home ownership, which some people, it doesn't, not just people from the Northeast Ward, but people throughout the city. And if we didn't have the problem that everybody's seeing with students renting houses and breaking down the neighborhoods, if those haven't been reflected, then we have a problem, because it's a common thing that is said over and over and over again. And if it's not in here, question, whether we haven't asked good questions, or, I just question it, because we're missing huge pieces.
I just want to get clarity on this. Fourth survey is coming up. We've had 3 community-wide surveys. Just as an example, are we saying when we reach out and do a survey, we do a demographic? Do you own a home? Do you rent? Are you feeling like that you're not reaching out to homeowners or renters on these surveys? Isn't it?
Let me be clear. I'm not feeling like anything. I am observing that those things have not made it into the goals and into the subsections, the H's. So those are things that I'm concerned about. And there are also huge questions about I-69, about do we have the exits, do we not have the exits, how on earth are we thinking about housing if we are not sure what is impacting. And maybe they'll come later. I'm just telling you those are a couple of things that I think are missing. But I will leave you with that thought, and I'll go.
I want to understand this.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're saying you're sensing something, but you don't actually know, or well, help me out. We've got such a community engagement component to get us to where we are. Yeah. These are not just things that are sourced through an existing condition report, the facts, survey information, public sentiment. Where do we feel the disconnect is? Is it we connect? Let's fix it. But I'm not hearing what the disconnect is. I'm hearing that there's a sense that there's a disconnect. And I'm trying to figure out how do I correct that.
I actually did a few times, but I'll try again.
Okay.
There are multiple people who express themselves about these concerns. And maybe we didn't ask the appropriate question, what is your biggest worry about your neighborhood? Maybe there's but we didn't have an opportunity to add questions in there. But maybe some participants in the groups, in the neighborhood groups, maybe, I don't know, I wasn't in the neighborhood group, but to have two huge things, and actually the data reflecting cattywampus in our home ownership. We have disproportionate.
Everybody knows what you mean by that. Your ownership is
63%
yes,
of our
I just wanna make sure everybody knows
63% of our homes are rented
Roughly
and
60 a renter
No.
versus 40%. That
30
is a
something
little
percent.
uncomfortable. Yes.
And it's not only unusual for all cities, but it's even unusual for those from university towns. It has been a huge concern to, I think, to everybody in this room. I mean, I'm not, maybe not, but.
But I'm sorry, facts. We've learned that you are agreeing that's the facts. What we're saying in the housing neighborhood focus groups, we're also hearing, they acknowledge that fact. When we asked, what are the opportunities from a housing standpoint, or what are the challenges, we heard information, taking that information, and we're starting to formulate policy. This is not.
Maybe it'll come, and I'm sure it'll come later.
No, it's not coming later. This is happening now.
I actually think that
So- sorry.
Ownership. I'm in the real business. Took that last night and kind of soaked it in and thought about it. There's a portion of that we cannot do, it's not possible.
That's true.
But the thing is that there are quite a few subdivisions built just outside of the city limits that are primary ownership of home. And that's not counted because it's not city limits.
That's right.
And so I would argue that we're closer to 50.
Oh, when you start to add the
Instead
spirit.
of 6, because I just kept thinking, I guess it'd be right. Anyway, so then I thought, oh, each division is one. There are hundreds of homes that are owner occupied. It's not counted, it's not city limits.
No,
So-
that's a great fact, that data point, 60, 40, whatever, probably is in the city limits, but when you start the sphere of influence, it starts to level out. We either have to communicate that better, or we have you all to take that into account when you start developing policy.
I
It's a good work.
agree. I don't think there's any way to.
And I think, Keith, I think the takeaway is neighborhood preservation and neighborhood integrity is really important to the community. And in some areas, that it's been kind of diluted away because concentration of, in some subdivisions, you've seen transitions from home ownership to rentals for whatever. And so the city, we've been reactive to that. We don't have to deter it or, be proactive about it. And so, in housing study last night, they talked about recommendations, including rental inspections and some other ways to help, I just track that and monitor it. And so I think that's what Kathleen's saying. A lot of that is driven by student rentals. Someone wants to rent a house and it makes more money selling it to 40 by the bedroom versus, a family. And so just making sure that that's something that's highlighted, I think, in the plan, whether that's not necessarily a plan element, but something that's, distinguishable maybe either in neighborhood character or under housing or it's like a specific goal or, because I don't think it's explicit. It talks about student housing here, but I don't think maybe it's not explicit as maybe it should be in that regard. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Does that sound like,
Let's be intentional about these things.
And I believe that Kathleen just mentioned is happening in my community of Northgate subdivision. About half of that now is owned by a single person, and she's renting those houses out to students. The question is, how does we know that's happened, does it into policy, and what is being done about it? And what rights do the homeowners who have been there 30 and 40 years, what rights do we have to protect our community from that type of, what is being done?
What's the zoning in that area? Single family?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a zoning issue, zoning enforcement issue. It's happening in my neighborhood. We have college kids renting, 3-4 bedroom houses with 3, 4 college kids in my neighborhood. I had one totally unrelated to each other in that neighborhood, in that house. It's been pointed out to the city on numerous occasions that that's going on, and the answer is, we can't really do anything about it. Well, that's not true. There are zoning ordinances that would limit that. So,
Needs enforcement.
in the housing study, for example, one of the first points in the housing study is that we're aggressive with our zoning
Enforcement.
enforcement. That's just not true. I don't know how that statement is even in there.
So as a planning body, what do we do now to head that off and go forward so that it doesn't continue to erode our community?
Well, and it's complicated to have another level too, because if you have rental houses that college kids are living in, then that takes that house off the market for a single family ownership. So single families could own that house, but they can't because it is now being rented.
That's a big thing. I'm not trying to cut you off, but we've seen that so many times. Where like the owners won't even rent out unless they're renting directly to college kids.
So
like
they
you said,
want that
no, but they intentionally want 4 people living in that house, from they can charge them $600 per person because they know they're going to get that amount of money. So when you have regular people who are looking for somewhere to live here in the you almost got to go to Lufkin or something to find somewhere reasonable because the market is being kind of taken over with.
Or out of the city limits.
Yes, because you want to get that house. You say, oh, it's a nice house, it's a nice neighborhood. And then you talk to the renter, and they say, well, we all want to rent to college kids. They'll say, we want to rent to college kids. And they know when they got 4 bedrooms, you can put one person in each room and charge them individual rent rooms.
And my question is, in focus groups, was this even discussed? Because I didn't see it.
To the level of detail that you're drilling into, I'd say no.
And so that's why I go, and I'm going to support Kathleen in her statement. I'm not sure those focus groups were clearly representative of the community. We all put names on a map of people. Very few people are included in the focus groups. Very few people. And question on numerous occasions, how were those focus groups put together? Who made the decision who's going to be on those focus groups? I've never gotten.
I will tell you, I don't know if individuals were selected. I've done a lot. That was one of the best focus groups I've ever participated in on that subject because I felt like there was diversity. Now, you may argue that, no, it wasn't broad enough, and that's fair. But from my point of view, having done this a lot, it was good input. Now, my point is this is a layer of the DIRT committee is a layer. The focus groups, 5 or 6 of them, is a layer. Online surveys is a layer. All these layers come together to help us get to this point.
The layers at any point are not representative and valid. Then each level up, the information is less accurate.
I'm not sure I buy into that. I don't think that's...
Well, I do.
The reason why, sir, is you layer the cake this way because you want these different groups to have different tentacles, and you take that input and you weigh it with the next layer.
But I've done focus groups, many focus groups. You have to make sure that they're representative of the groups that you want there. And that was one reason why I understood the map that we developed to be a representative example of folks in town.
So if I could add, if you don't mind, so we had a neighborhood focus group, and then we actually had a housing focus group. And those were similar, because they both talked about housing. The focus group talked more about kind of quality of life, people's experiences. And we talked a lot about rental concentration. We talked a lot about student rentals and how that impacts the neighborhood, noise, cars, and traffic. So that was discussed simply in the neighborhood focus group. And then the housing was more on those physical characteristics, like property maintenance, kind of quality of housing stock, age of housing stock, size of it. Did we actually have enough to meet the needs? So they both talked about similar things, but I think they had different focuses. And the neighborhood focus group was pretty diverse group there. And we did talk about it. I think maybe that issue isn't being highlighted enough. Is what kind of maybe I'm hearing from the group. There would be like a bigger emphasis on kind of neighborhood integrity kind of issue, especially related to homeownership and rental concentration.
It's very possible that it's not hitting on all cylinders. And that's why we're trying to break this up into pieces. I don't want to, when we get past this, into the details of housing, I don't remember, 8 different policy statements. Here's a good example. housing, 8 different policy statements. The question we're asking you all, based on your place in the community, are we missing something in this series of policy statements? So we're taking it piece by piece, one plan element at a time, so that we can correct things that we might be missing. And so by the time we nurture this and edit it and get it to a point where you all are comfortable and feeling like it's representative, then we're drafting. So we're not drafting the plan and presuming things, we're taking information from you all every step along the way. So if there's something that's counterintuitive or of disagreement in this, for example, we need to know it now.
So can I jump in quickly and add a comment to what Mr. Poole said, conversation about the ratio between renter, owner occupied? You said it would be hard to quantify. Could we go out with the same data sets we quantity and go out into our ETJ in the areas where Spring Creek is and see if COs are different, if it swings the pendulum on that, and then maybe go out, 5 or 6 miles beyond the ETJ and see if it's comparable county levels are, or if it's just in the city is where that exists. Again, I don't know the answer to that. Seems like that would be a way to try and quantify it and see if it is closer to 50-50, because I'd like to know that. Is it right outside where that reaches equilibrium?
The challenge with that is, admittedly, you probably vouch for this, you have way better data in the city than the county does. And so if you feel like that's really important and you direct us to go do that, we will do it. We will do it.
So it can be quantified, it would just be...
It is there.
Right,
If
okay.
the data is there.
Okay.
Don't I remember in the housing study something when they're saying that the majority of housing in the county was owner occupied? I remember reading that somewhere. There was some-
And that's what you were...
That's what it is.
I inherently, but I mean, I read it in the housing.
I'm sorry.
I think that's right.
Yes, so that data is now based on, based on the data, the owner occupancy rate is higher in the county. Now, there's less units, right? There's less density that we're seeing, but you have a higher concentration of rental in the city just because housing, to workforce and employment and students and things. Like I said earlier, we are working with local realtor stations to get better local data. So hopefully that'll be reflected in an updated housing study. But for the scope of this, we really wanted to focus on inside the city. We talked about the county because that's important and it affects our people who live here, that go to the doctor here. We're still using all of our facilities. And I think, was it Ann Kelly who made a comment at the workshop last night that the county housing needs to be a part of that discussion because it impacts the housing that's being developed here in the city. So for sure. And that was you're right, Cindy, that was in the housing study. So.
This kind of proves my point that we need more time in this because we haven't even gotten through the goals in our own committee in order all the recommendations. And I personally feel like we're being pushed and rushed by an artificial deadline. I know your company has it and you'd like to get paid and get out of town probably.
Well, I don't think that's fair to say.
That's business.
But you can always move that date.
But when you turn in a draft statement, that's it for us. We're stuck. We can't make changes. We can't tweak it. We can vote on it, say yes or no. But right now, we've spent a year picking Nacogdoches come together in a shopping bag. And that's all we've really done. We've colored, we've done stuff. I know they're important to you, but to the average person in this town, they feel underrepresented by somebody who doesn't really even know the town that well. And we need time to discuss things like, H3, H6, H7. I mean, if we can't even nurture your circular baby up here, we certainly can't nurture all these things in the next 2 months. And that I would encourage you to put some of this off and let us discuss these point by point. Because for me...
Absolutely. I totally agree. I don't want you to get the impression that we're grandfathering on the plan.
I do have that impression.
We are working with you all at what you need to do. As I pointed out, all this information has to come from you. And if you're not, because you feel like the time is good, then you need to let the city know.
Yeah, well, we've tried to let them know, and they kind of eat it for 8 or 9 months. And then all of a sudden it's like, here it is, here's the draft. And we're like, where did this come from? And to me, The circle should start with, and that's inclusive of everybody here, a good place to live, food to eat, clean water to drink, sewer and garbage, a job, and parks, and friends, and neighbors, and safety and security. That will begin for all human beings. It does not begin with, I want my piece of the pie, I want my bike trail, I want that. It begins with human needs overall, and then we start to drill down. And I think you guys have got it backwards, sort of. I mean, even the terms that resonate with people in this, except for a few selected people and focus groups. That's my opinion.
You have to tell us what words to use. You have to tell us.
Well,
I'm trying to implore on you.
I'm going to.
Good. Well, you're welcome to.
But I'm done with it. I can't support this kind of stuff, and I can list the examples if you want to, or if you want to move on.
It's your committee.
It's not my committee.
It is your committee. I'm over here telling you.
Well, I tell you, I'll put it real succinctly. When you start creating enforcement, code restrictions, taxes, tax abatement centers, what you're doing we're a poor town to begin with. Our people are poor here. The people in the county are a little better off, in those planned neighborhoods. But what they were talking about last night was in essence making a homeowners association out of Nacogdoches. And they're going to fine us and enforce it and tax us, and yet all these other people from outside of the county are living in luxury on our dime, but there's only 17,000 of us paying taxes here. And missing the fact that you're going to bankrupt the poor people in this town and the old people in this town to pay for all these goodies, that are not. I mean, my example is, first of all, I want a good place to live and food to eat, and I want the basics. And then after that, I'll go on a vacation. Parks and trails to me and bike lanes and paths are one thing from your regular life. If you buy all of that stuff before you pay for sewers and infrastructure, you're going to go bankrupt. You're wrong. You're living you're living in a fantasy world to me.
I'm sorry, Brett, if I may. I don't think anyone here has stated that that's the intent. I think the consultant is just saying we've identified these high-level aspirational on all of the community input, and you guys are the sounding board. So,
But isn't food and water a highly aspirational thing?
Yeah, it's a hierarchy of needs.
yes. And so I think some of those things are inherent, and the plan talks about
Why doesn't it say that?
infrastructure and water and sewer, and it's going to talk about neighborhood integrity and accessibility to grocery stores and retail and services. And once we can start getting into, I think, more of the weeds, the detailed policies, specifically talk about some of those things. And one of them, and one of these goals, they actually talk about, I think, proximity of neighborhoods, the 15-minute walk, being able to have easy access to grocery stores.
But is that possible? I mean, the last plan in 2003 had a 10-minute city. So we bumped it up by 15 minutes, but you said there's no place I can walk 15 minutes, tree store?
Not on the southwest, it's nowhere we can. I mean, even
We've only got 3 grocery stores.
So, and there, obviously, if you think about it, the majority of the middle now is like North Street part. So, I mean, you have groceries on South Street, you have Walmart. If I live on Ritchie Street, it's impossible for me to walk to the grocery store. Unless I can, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
Today's
Like,
that.
yeah, that has to be, I'm off this day, but this is the day I want to walk to the store. Outside of that, I think there were conversations about like a gardens and things like that could be brought, but I mean, realistically speaking, I mean, maybe we talked about it, I think the last meeting, we just even like, it's not even a to ride that bikes and walk it. It's dimly lit, like we don't even have street lights almost in the street store. Like I said, I had to almost hit somebody to avoid hitting somebody because I couldn't even physically really see them enough because it was pitch black outside and they had on all that, of course, but
when
you
you
can't drive down the street without worrying about what it's going to do to your car.
That's a great thing for us to want, and to try to pay for. But statements in here is a stick on the common person here in town. Like, if you give me a ticket, if you give a poor person or a senior who lives on Social Security a fine because their lawn's not mowed or their place is messy or something, they're not necessarily going to have the money to pay that fine. They're just going to go in a big circle down, just like when you get a ticket and you can't pay it and it gets higher and higher and higher. That's what worries me about a lot of this. I don't think there's a person in this room that doesn't want everybody in Nacogdoches, everybody to have a good place to live and water to drink. And they don't want to be, in some ways this is calling people racist, and we're not. We may have had a history like the United States or like the entire beginning of the world, but we have done better. This town is getting better and very accepting. And that's all the filibuster I'm going to do for the next 5 minutes.
Was there process questions? Like those things like that would be addressed once we kind of, like it keeps being said, like get into the weeds? Because those are all the things that so when are we doing that? Like when is that?
So those are things like strategies that you're talking about that help implement some of these policies that stem from the goals. And so all those things are important. It's getting a little bit into the weeds. I think that we agree on, okay, the goals may not match where we're at today. That's okay. These are meant to be what we want to be, right? So these aren't meant to reflect kind of existing conditions. I think, aspirational, we want to be better. Right? How do we want to be better? And then if these goals really are what we want to work towards to be a better community, well, okay, what are the policies, what are the strategies? I don't think there's anything in here that says that we want to give citations to poor people who can't cut their grass.
I can read them to you. To all the lines where it changes from embrace all these aspirational words, and then it turns to enforcement, fines, code violations, inspect rentals. Do you want all your rentals inspected, Ed? Yeah, do you want people walking through your apartment saying, well, just like a restaurant, if you do a restaurant and you do code violations, and then you do apartment violations, well, why don't we come in your house since you're renting kids? Can't we say, man, that carpet's bad, fine. And I am getting into the weeds here, but I just think...
Are we worried about poor people, or are we not? I'm confused.
Well, just wait.
I got whiplash from your...
Well, just leave or something, but
worldviews going on.
I want to maintain decorum here, but to me, it's just...
We are still on the preliminary vision statement.
What I asked for is that we have more time, that's all this, and not have an artificial date of March.
I missed an hour, we've gone 5 minutes into a meeting. So, maybe we just need to move on to the next point.
It sounds like you agree with what Kurt mentioned, what infrastructure we want to be guided across on this. Or maybe it's something that needs to be, not enforced, I hate that word, but just something that needs to be taken more serious in terms of if we want to move forward with what Nacogdoches looks like for years to come on this infrastructure. And I don't know, we must have...
See, that's what I'm talking about. If you don't get your way, people leave. And I don't know who this person is, but we need to start speaking our truth here. You have a truth that I haven't heard, and I'll bet you it's different than mine. Hear it, instead of just all standing around sort of swaying and going, what did we do today? Because every time I leave a meeting, I'm like, what did we do today? So, knows what I said, speak up, and let's dig into this and fix it.
Well, I guess that's what I don't know that I really heard. So that's what I'm asking is when do we get to that kind of weeds?
Yeah, there were a couple of goals specifically that in regards to for climate change, resiliency, and sustainability. There was confusion about what does resiliency mean and what does sustainability mean, and climate change means different things to different people, and so that's not that goal to make it maybe more simple terms. That way it's easy to understand. And so things like that, we make sure our goals are succinct, they're simple, everyone can understand, they have common meaning before we get to the weeds with the policies and recommendations. And so, to me, that's a great to spend some time to talk about and making sure that it's worded in such a way that it actually reflects, the values of the community. There was another one that talked about pedestrian activity, and the one that was talking about the city managing sensitive area managed, because we don't really have authority over all these sensitive areas. Maybe it should be encouraged to preserve. So things like that, I think, are great things for the committee to focus on. Those the language and those goals, and then when we get some common ground on that, then we can get into the weeds on, okay, so see for neighborhood integrity, be advocating for a rental inspection. It sounds like a priority, or that shouldn't be. So those are the things we can get into the weeds about, but we need to make sure that these goals right first, and then we can get into the weeds about the type of enforcement that would, that the city wants to pursue to achieve those goals. I hope that makes sense.
Mentioned earlier, that we in this group had talked about housing and the protecting our neighborhoods and maintaining the integrity of our neighborhoods. And I think from the very beginning, I think I've been here at every meeting. And from the very beginning of those meetings, I think we all agree that, we need to protect our neighborhoods. And I think that needs to be like an overarching value in this. So I don't know where you put outside that or whatever, another ring out. But all of us agree that the integrity of our neighborhoods need to be protected or taken care of, or if you don't like, promoted or something. I don't know.
Keith, is there a way, maybe this isn't the framework that works for us. Maybe it's not a wheel. Maybe we need to think outside the wheel, if you will, and figure out what is a better arching framework that deals with the values and puts it in a succinct way. I know we've gone around and around about a lot of different issues here today, but maybe we can vision this together and work with y'all to get to that, and that will maybe lead us so we can discuss the economic viability pieces.
I appreciate that, and I want to support Brad on a couple of things. Thank you. I do think you're trying to get to goals and policies. You said something remarkable. We want clean water, we want safe places to live. Those are basic values. And if everyone in the community buys into what you said, then that changes that entirely. And if that changes, then everything else might subsequently. The thing is, a circle is a pyramid, it's a square. You gotta get what you're describing nailed down. And if everybody bought into what you were saying, right? Safe place to live, shelter, safety. That might be your vision statement. I'm not saying it is, I'm saying I heard you say something different than that. And if that's the case, get this vision statement right first, because I think it's going to inform everything else, whether it's a circle, a widget, or whatever the thing is. So if we're backing up to go, oh, maybe we don't have this right, or those 4 guiding principles, then we got to get that. That's why we take an incremental approach to these things. We're not trying to write your plan without you. We're trying to help you get to a plan that you support. So your comments, and if everybody else buys into it, then you change that dramatically. To say something entirely different, if that's your primary value, we've got to start there.
Well, just like it prompted you earlier on, embracing cultural and historic roots, it was like scratching an old scab for you. That doesn't really work for me. So that's not a very aspirational statement if it's.
Well, I think that Montoya's, reflection was that that's not really today. But that's what we want, right? That's the goal. That's what we want to work towards. So I think he was agreeing this is a good vision statement because it is something we want to work towards, even if it doesn't reflect how.
That was my understanding as well. Is that correct, Chief?
Right.
You were saying that's not what we are today.
No.
But you weren't arguing that that's not what we.
He just said no.
We're a lot further than we were 25 years ago.
There you go.
But we need to look at the future, and I think that's what we're hopefully wanting to do for the future, not for ourselves, but for our grandkids, our kids, whoever else, our family members that are going to live here. I mean, I'm an old guy. I'm not going to be around forever. So, I want it to be good for everybody else, but I'm not here. And if I can be part of that, I think that's what we want to do as a group here, is to be part of that so that we can make our city better, a better place for everybody, and a fair place for everybody. That's what I'm looking at.
But we want to help you. We don't want to work. That's not what our role is. We're not doing that. If there's a different philosophy here, and you all agree with the shifting to a different view of this, let's work through that first.
So I think it'd be helpful to go around the room and just get some feedback from everyone on the and just get some thoughts on agree, disagree, should we tweak, change. I think that would be helpful because I don't know, everybody maybe would go around the room and I'm going to call on you first, Ed, since you're at the end, if you don't mind, what do you think about the vision statement?
Well, I mean, I'm listening to all these comments, and they're good. But when I think about a comprehensive plan, I think about, I want this to be the guide where we're headed to be. In other words, I want lofty goals, I want the things that are attainable. I'm listening to about streetlights, and I have no problem with that. I think we're going to go to city council tomorrow and ask them to fix the streetlights and figure out how to do that, but I don't think it needs to be in the plan. See, what's important, very important, but we're trying to create a document in the next 20, 25 years that reflects where we want to go and be as a city. And there are a lot of things that I think really good with this, but it, vision statement, I think I'm going to live in that place.
And to piggyback on Ed's statement, updated our plan was 2003. It's been 20 years, but you shouldn't wait 20 years to update your comprehensive plan. It's a dynamic, fluid document. It should be evaluated regularly to make sure that it's keeping up with current conditions, future trends, that it's still serving the needs, because in 5 years things could change, 10 years things could change. So this should have a 20-year outlook, but every year, every 5 years, making sure the data is still current. And so, I hope you all realize that this is meant to be a guide, but it's evolving, right? It's a living, breathing thing that's going to be modified over time. And like Ed said, it's aspirational. It's okay to be bold in these goals. So it's okay if they don't reflect the current conditions.
I mean, infrastructure is very important. I mean, we all know that. I mean, we're lacking severely in that. And then other things like that. But, mission statement should be to maintain a happy infrastructure and growth, not put in more sewer water. So we need to come up with a plan to do those two things, or whatever we end up coming up with. The plan's one of you, he just needs to give us to say, yes, that's very important. And that outer wheel that you guys are talking about, I think that's great. I mean, it encompasses everything, because if you look at every category within that wheel, those items that you're talking about putting on the outer ring do that. And so if we could have a vision of where we want that to, what we want it to look like, and we have our goals set to do that, then yes, let's take a big sheet tablet out and start working on street lights and sewer lines and water lines. Let's drill down and get that done. But to put it in here, it probably needs to be general statement.
Could we quickly go right down the one or two key words that you think are most important in red? Clean water, safety, those are really important values, right? If you have in your vision, you argue that from an environmental standpoint, lighting, that helps promote safety. Clean water, infrastructure. So let's get it figured out. Really, the next step is, what are the top 5 priorities? 3 to 5 priorities. You have top 3 or 4 priorities. Cindy, you have different priorities, and then we can start to work it through that way. I think if we're trying to get into these goal statements and you're maybe uncomfortable with that, we haven't figured out what your priorities are yet. So could we just, would it be okay if y'all just kind of say, what do you think the key words that reflects your vision? Because I haven't even heard y'all talk that way. And I'd be curious to hear what you think it is.
I mean, I can't. I guess my thought about this is that maybe I have more time with the groups and the data that came from that, but like, I'd be really comfortable throwing all of this out if this is what you said. So, thriving and vitality.
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody in a spot, right? But thriving, vitality, that's aspirational, that makes sense. We can work around that for sure. A couple of thoughts?
No, one of the biggest things for me is I'm concerned about our elderly people in this community that don't have. We have that faction of elderly that do have. But we have the elderly that have access to, going to the grocery store, have transportation. I mean, all the things that are critical for them as an elderly person in this community. To me, that is because we have a large population of elderly people here, whether we like it or not. It's going to come on our shoulders to take care of them when they get older.
Multi-generational.
Yeah.
To me, that could fall into a lot of
exactly. Fall into that spot where they need to be, where they can get what they need.
I don't have problems with what the vision statement, the goal, if vision is. I think it's a good one. It's just if somewhere you can say that all of this is toward, but with the understanding that the basic human needs, like you would have in the hierarchy of needs that you study, that they're all, that's the basis, and that these things bring us to that. I'm not one of few words, but one of the things that in my background that I saw in the world in general, at one time, they do this periodically, leading women to discuss what their goals are going to be for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And all of those people from higher, more developed countries, these lofty things that they wanted to do. And then the women from the developing world all said, well, that would be fine for you. But my concern is that my children have clean water and medicine, place to live. Or I know there were a group of women that came from Swaziland to work on planning and education in New York. And one day they took them down in the winter to give out blankets to the street people in New York. And as they handed them out, the street people said, well, I don't like that color. That's not very nice. To women who were leaders in their country that had no ceiling on their kitchens. So we don't have exactly the same thing here, but we do. And that's really, I think, what Brad is trying to say.
You should tell him where you come from, what you worked out for so many years, to give him perspective. You tell him what they don't have. Where did you work?
30 years in the developing part of Africa. And
well, that gives perspective. And that goes with a very rich community in many ways.
But it's the same thing here. We have people who can do anything they want, and then we have people who have nothing. It is the second area in the state. So those of us who have should recognize those that are, develop our area in a better way.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
Sorry. I guess so I would probably put sustainability in my circle. And I think it all comes to climate change. I think it's a thing. I think we have to build our infrastructure to withstand it, and that's important to me.
Good.
I think mine would be empower, a plan that empowers everyone, so that behind bringing up the bottom to the middle, instead of starting with the top, start at the bottom and bring the bottom up, so that there's a meeting point where everyone's empowered.
Based on the conversation thus far, I would say that it would be a good idea, this preliminary vision statement, to be amended, not necessarily changed, because I'm not going to contest anything that's there now, but add to it the components of safety, clean water, and strive for this. The city would strive to maintain and develop and maintain those primary essential elements of human life. Brad rattled off several: food and the fundamental things that I think are often so easily taken. I think if that was addressed here in this preliminary vision statement, then it would sit on top of the wheel, and it's a gift. It would govern that, and I think that would accomplish. I think that would be an outstanding and a good start that's in motion.
Excellent. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree with the visions, but I think adding something to the lives of our citizens would be, because I think we need to realize that's the overall goal. We don't want to forget that, and we want that to be the driving force that overall, even though we have all of these goals, and this is a vision statement, that the overall goal is to improve the lives of the citizens in that village.
I've been comfortable with it as it's been, as we've been working on it over the last few months.
How do you feel what you're hearing so far with your colleagues, with some of these other sort of important but different? I mean,
Well, I think they're all good points to bring up, and this is a good, this is here for us to talk about these kinds of things. In terms of, at what level are they at? This is the vision statement, which is broad. Like Mabel referenced earlier, where we had, I guess we broke up into groups, had the blackboard, went through, and it really kind of came up with some of the framework for this, and then we had a lot of public engagement, and I believe the information that we received back on that was 94 pages in a PDF, where we got to see all the feedback that was there. I think that, good points are being brought up. But, if I mean, being asked specifically, like, how do you feel about the vision statement? Feel good about it.
The question kind of is, what's your vision for the future? You're saying, yeah, this is getting there.
Like Ed said, it's a place I like to live. It's a place I know. I love it here.
To be honest, I agree with the vision statement as something that we should aspire to be. I think my biggest thing is if we make sure that we continue to allow it to hold us accountable, that we're always reaching for that mark, and that we never forget that. It says diversity, so let's make sure that we're truly all about and including everyone in this process. Economic vitality, once again, empowerment. So working out ways to where maybe we can work to establish a middle class here. I don't really feel and believe that we have one. So my perception is either you're at the bottom or you're at the top. And it feels like if you're at the bottom, there's no way to get up. You're just stuck. So there's ways to make sure you're able to assist people, no matter what background, no matter what you look like, to be able to look at that statement, or look at what that statement is looking like for the city that you're in, and then not trying to move away as soon as possible, because there's better guys that you want to live here in that place. That's my purpose for even seeking to be on a part of it. I love that, but I want to, as well as my kids, as well as my grandkids. It's a continuous thing. It's not just about me in the process.
So the feedback after what Jaron said, mobility, get people to move up and down the social framework. That talks about housing and access to other public infrastructure and things like that. What do you think?
I like it, okay. The only thing I would add to it would be neighborhoods somewhere and somehow. Because as I said, for the very group, neighborhoods have been an important aspect of what we talked about and the vision statement.
Larry, do you elaborate on the neighborhoods? Is it protecting? Is it?
I think most of our discussion has focused around protecting the integrity of neighborhoods and neighborhoods, valuing neighborhoods, that sort of thing.
Healthy neighborhoods?
Yeah, healthy neighborhoods, yeah. Growing neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods that are historic, making sure that, they're maintain their historic integrity. Those neighborhoods that need services, making sure they get the services that they need. And I kind of disagree that doesn't need to be in this plan, Ed, because I think it does. Because this plan is to hold us accountable. And therefore, we need to put it in writing that we're going to make sure that we upgrade neighborhoods, promote neighborhoods, and protect neighborhoods. And making sure that people have advantages and access to things that they need to have access to. Just my thought.
First of all, I'm glad I didn't have to go first because I've gotten to hear from the opinions of others. The discussion, I think, is very, very important. About outer rings for this conceptual framework, I think the vision statement needs to have our outer rings. I don't know that we need outer rings on something visual. I think that's where it needs to be. We're talking about things that are all-encompassing, things that we all want to aspire to. Well, if you can't put that into words, then where are we going with it? I've heard everyone talk about how you want to make it better for our families and for your kids and grandkids, and we need better neighborhoods, and we need better infrastructure. the entire reason I ran for the city council last year was because of my now 19-month-old son. I don't want him to be dealing with the problems we're dealing with now. I want us to these goals. And when we've revised this plan and revised it again, I want my son to grow up in a town where we tackle problems and we weren't afraid to come into and talk about the things that are opportunities for growth, things that are problems, but also highlight the things that we do well. But not get mad about it and be able to share those things even if they're uncomfortable to us. Because, look, the town, when Jaron was saying that you're not 15 minutes walking to a grocery store, my best hope for my house is 30. No one in this room walked direct for this meeting. We're so spread out. I know that this gets back to a very specific nailed down issue, but I know roughly where he lives. I know where a number of you live. I think about James. It would be, 25, 30 minutes for you to walk to Brookshire's? That's the closest thing.
As slow as I walk, I'd never get there.
And so if we're talking about becoming a community that, is connected and we can walk to places, we need to know what that means for Nacogdoches. So I know that's a lot, and that's more than 2 words, more than you asked for.
Right. But the message you're, I think, projecting is that it's a really important piece, and all the other pieces, the goals, also helps you get there.
Right.
So if a 15-minute walk is the goal, I'm not saying it is, but what if, and you're saying you want to support that now, then the policies or strategies are how do we get there.
Right.
So try here, and I'm not saying become a 15-minute walkable community, but that might be something, a strategy that's embedded in your plan. It's up to you. It's always up to you. Appreciate it.
I like our focus on diversity, but I'd like to see maybe something including safety, like everyone's talking about, like safe for you to walk somewhere, community, included in that safety idea. And also, I would like to see something where we talk about collaborating with SFA. I chose to live here, so we came from Mississippi when my husband got a job at SFA. And where we came from, it was a community, and the town embraced the university and vice versa. So, they got a lot of research grants and collaborated and worked together, and I feel like that's something we're missing is SFA and Nacogdoches really working together.
Do you think that comes out literally in the statement, or is it about strategy, partnerships, collaborations, or would you like to see that literally in this? That's an amazing asset you all have to work with. Should it be celebrated?
I think SFA should be celebrated. That's part of the reason why some of us are here. So.
It's the biggest economic driver in the region.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is fun because you can talk about the relationship with SFA and as an economic driver, as a partner, healthy living, multiple generations.
And this gets back to the weeds, but in some of the recommendations, I put notes down where, there should be recommendations for collaboration with SFA. Like, for example, with history. SFA has a public history program, and we should have interns at all of our and I think we do now, but we should have more. And I agree with you. I think it's an important connection. And another connection is with NISD. There's a recommendation here about public education. The city has no influence on NISD. And I'm just kind of like, okay, where did that, maybe it's better to not have a recommendation in that way, but a recommendation for collaboration or something. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the important elements, and I think you showed it in the outline, Keith, is intergovernmental cooperation. So that was something City Council emphasized. They wanted the implementation to include, not just the city being responsible and being the end-all be-all for everything, but like making sure that the strategies included strategic partnerships with university and school districts and county to work together and be more effective and efficient in implementing some of these things. Because you're right, there's some things that the city's authority over, there's some things that the SFA has authority over, but if we work together towards a common goal, well then we're going to be much more. So that's going to be an element as part of the plan, as part of the intergovernmental cooperation that you see in the implementation chapter.
But I think that over the last couple of years, I can honestly say, being on the school board and having the partnerships that we have with everybody in the community, with the city, with the county, with with other school districts, I think that's part of what we're trying to do, that education for every one of our children in this community has to be the best that it can be, community, supported by businesses, supported by everybody in this community, and we can't do it alone as an entity of NISD. It has to be NISD and the community, as the city does, as a state, as everybody. And so that's to me is what's really critical, is that those partnerships are being developed, and we need to continue them and make it better for everybody, the best that they can possibly get here. That's the way I look at it. I mean, I'm an idealist, but I see the whole gamut of all the stuff that we have in this community, and we have some great things. And that's just where I'm coming from.
You have the floor.
Good enough.
I want to hear it again. I want to get it right.
Well, Keith.
We are welcoming all your criticisms and critiques, for sure. Okay. Vote down on your vision.
Well, I don't want to be, because I get into the weeds some here, but, and they were really putting you on the spot, and I have great sympathy for that with people. You don't know what the questions are going to be, and then they hit you with, tell me this, And they were comparable towns or cities, and you didn't mean this, but you're like, well, if you were like in Vancouver, and I was like, I don't know.
No.
Vancouver. And then the other.
Say if you were like Vancouver.
I know, but see, that's what people heard. And then the other person, Paducah, Kentucky, where if we tear down houses and give the land to artists, and I was like, who's an artist? Who says you're not an artist? It was not within reach of us. And then they said, well, no, we mean more like Plano or Richardson. But we're not close to Dallas or Fort Worth. So it's hard, and I have sympathy for you. Because you come from another place, and it's hard to figure out this odd little funky town.
I'm sorry, if you don't mind. I think during that meeting, they were asking for examples of strategies and programs that other cities have done to achieve some of the neighborhood revitalization things. And so they were trying to give specific program examples from other communities, but they were those are important to consider in context, right? Because the context of that community is different from this community, and those we look at that maybe could be adapted to our, but I think they were trying to say that you should be like this community or you're comparable to this community. I think they were trying to find strategies to achieve some of the goals, and so based on their experience in mind.
I respect that. My question is about this. Tell me in succinct words, like everybody else said, what you think the vision is for your community.
All right, well, let me ask you first. If all the pictures that they had to explain the different house, each section of this plan, there were all these photographs of the 12 different sections of the town. Mm-hmm. And it was all pretty much crappy houses, falling down houses. There's Waterford, Colonial Hills, and all those places that I think Bell Point, aren't they in the city? Why did nobody drive through there and take pictures?
There were images of those neighborhoods
There were images
in the
of
plan.
every neighborhood in the report.
Okay, so I missed that.
You missed that.
Okay.
But I'm going to go and press you again.
Please.
Vision.
Okay.
In key words, and say, what do you want Nacogdoches to be?
I want Nacogdoches to retain its, it's an unusual place that was built. You can take the brick streets. It was built brick by brick for here by 9 different flags of people coming under here and ruling it. And before that, for 10,000 years, it was built by the Caddoan tribes or Caddo Indians. And they have their influence here too. It rings for generations still. So I would like it statement to some of the people that lived in the photos of the torn down houses that you see here in town, and say for them to read this, know what you were talking about, I don't think. So I think, I don't have the language for you, but I think we need to simplify it to an aspirational point, because I think what you have here is a topic verbiage And when you about the future, but people are picking at what's bothering them now. And I think that's, maybe we need to go a little further than just saying, well, this bothers me, so I'm going to put it in the statement right now, that we aspire not. There seems to be a lot of not in this whole program. We don't want to be this, we want a.
Can you give an example, Brad, of something?
Give an example of that. That's a critical statement. I appreciate it. Give me an example of that there. I'm not trying to endorse this, but I want to push back a little bit that you're making it creativity, and I don't think that's happening here, but maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Okay. It's cultural and historic rooting.
Yeah, I'm telling you. That's the point. You have to tell me.
I don't really understand. Why doesn't it just embrace its history, look to better itself, or to make a better play, have a better history? But, I haven't had time to rewrite this for you, but while celebrating the diversity of its people and traditions, well, that's a no, because what you're assuming is that we don't celebrate it now, but you aspire to. To me, that's the way I read it.
That's fair. That's fair.
The preservation of our natural environment, to me, that now we're a bunch of wastrels. And
when you push back, because we talked about what a vision statement is, and we're firmly saying this statement is not what you are today, or what you've been in the past.
Right.
It's what you are. You're looking to the future. So
that's saying but in essence, it's saying we don't celebrate it now.
I'm not trying to interject in the conversation. Are you saying that we do diversity of it? I mean, come from somewhere, and I don't want to play this card, but you come from a diverse demographic in Nacogdoches. Are you saying that Nacogdoches celebrates?
Yes, I am, actually. And I'll tell you something. I'm a white person, but I am an out of work that's one of the smallest minorities in this town. And I know in some way like to be discriminated against and to be hated and talked about, and I still have a lot of privilege in my life. But there's not, to me, I bet there's not a person that doesn't have LGBTQ things in their family, their grandchild, their spouse, but we do. Those people here, they take care of what's different or what's perceived to be different. Now, and you're shaking your head no, but maybe that's your experience. But in my experience, people here in this world right now, in Nacogdoches, people are married to everybody, all different colors, sizes, wants, needs, and there may be a past, and there may be a small segment of still not celebrating and not, open enough. But that's been true throughout history and will be continued to be true, probably. There's always a section of people closed-minded. There's going to be mental illness in all of us. So, yes, I do think that we celebrate it. I think the bulk of people at this circular table right here are pressed to find a racist or somebody.
I'm not saying someone is racist. I'm just, the city of Nacogdoches as a whole.
Yeah, we
When you
didn't
say
even get
diversity.
MLK Day off at SFA until 2 years ago.
Like
we have to work
when we
with
want to talk about the history of Nacogdoches.
That was the state.
A lot of the
Well, still, it's our
people who
community.
came to settle Nacogdoches had slaves.
So did the Egyptians.
Not just talking about here directly. I know that Egypt is, but I'm talking about right here where we live.
Does anybody have slaves here now?
I'm sure it's.
Yeah, they
We shouldn't get
forced
it.
some
But you
people at the
talk about,
donut
like-
shop for having people working.
You talk about the
working
history here, like we should include the diversity and say, okay.
Well, I'm not fighting against that. I'm just saying that he asked me what was negative about it. I'm trying to tell him where people come, where they don't. And it's not.
Yeah,
it's
I
just
like
really,
from
we're
my
getting
conception.
way down.
This is a really good conversation. I'm really glad to have this.
Oh, no, I mean, understand, I mean, we Brad about it here, we're gonna shake hands.
We're gonna have
Of course, of course.
But that's,
Marilyn, you had your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to say, I know that we all come from different backgrounds, but, when you first come to this town, you might think, not being a Bend, that things would, be a difficult kind of place. But if you look around, we all work at many things together in this town. And we may be the only town in the entire nation that's busy statues instead of tearing down statues. And it's because many of us are working at trying to celebrate the statue that we're getting ready to put up. So I think what Brad's trying to say is, a lot of this we're doing already. We'll do more, and we want to be better. But I don't think you're going to find another town in the whole nation that's celebrating and building up and putting up their statues instead of tearing down everything from their past.
And I just, I want to be constant that everyone's 5:30. And so with that, Marilyn, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. We did want to take a step next meeting. So I know that early February 9th, but I think ETJ has a lot of work cut out for them based on the input that we received so far. So that might be too soon to meet again, to give them the statement of the goals. So we were looking at meeting the third or fourth week in February instead. We want to meet just to meet, right? And so, so it would be that Thursday. I'm sorry,
And I truly apologize if I've offended anyone today. I'm really just trying to get to it. Yeah.
February 9th is the second.
24th, 16th.
20th through the 24th, is that what you?
So the third Thursday will be the 16th and the fourth will be the 23rd. So just want to get the temperature of the room, meeting, give them more time to work on those changes. Raise of hands.
16th of February.
Or 23rd. Thursday. So assuming Thursday, 3:30 in this room, it's just looking at, so I'm going to go around the room.
The 16th.
Tony, 16th, 23rd. Either one.
16th is
Either one.
16th.
All right, I think 23rd, more time.
All right.
Can't come on the
So February 23rd is going to be our next meeting, 3:30 in this room. Well, it's not calendar, reminders too.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I can.
guys.
Nothing on the 9th.
Nothing on the 9th.
I'll tell this other, I'll plan it.
Not off the hook. Between now and then, we're gonna do our best to take this information and look at this state of need, y'all will do that as well. And somewhere we're gonna put these pieces together. So y'all have to take that on the initial level. This was really helpful to me. Thank you all very much for your honesty and your so thank you. Thank you.
Have a good week. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
We don't have to travel. I'm planning on right now, but no, I've got some that's with you that have stage 4 cancer. Just had a transplant. One of them we just had a stem cell transplant. He's doing a little better. I might be running it up this weekend. I don't know. My grandbaby get baptized. Because I don't know something. But I just want to chill. Chill. Just chill.
Where's your son live?
Dallas.
Things work out.
Thank you. Thank you.
The stem cells are pretty.
Yeah. This is his, hey, how you doing? It's interesting. Oh, the person. Oh, that's interesting. No, I just bought from a little gift shop somewhere. But I just drawn to you use them to do hobbies. Oh, okay. So you're making it jewelry? I can. I even go right. Wow. Okay. Did you ever exhibit anywhere? I have people been already. I've been to the strip. At some point, I work for the so that's already that, right? Yeah, I'm going to go to that. Good seeing you, sir. Take care.
So we got the brewery to get us some.
That's exhausting.
If
predator. And of course, I would see limitations. I just, you know,